Season's greetings and welcome to my channel. I'm the Anunnaki Theorist. I want to wish everyone a happy holidays. I'm going to jump into this video right away because I have a lot that I want to go over. First things first, the title of the video, the not so virgin birth. This is probably going to annoy quite a few people because there's a lot that they want to believe in this miraculous birth. But I'm going to show a few things that will bring some light into this. And yet again, we have to understand this is all utilizing the Anunnaki theory. So basically things that I've already talked about in my previous videos, I will be bringing up because it is relevant to what is going to be talked about in this video. So we're going to come here to the Septuagint. Again, I always use the Greek. And when it comes to the birth of Jesus, which that's what's supposed to be the virgin birth, we have two Gospels, Matthew and Luke, that talk about this. Okay, so first we're going to come here to Matthew 1:18. And it says, "Now the birth of Jesus Christ was on this wise, when as his mother Mary was espoused to Joseph, before they came together, she was found with child of the Holy Ghost." Now, when I was in the church, and of course, my generation is one to, to have been around when the Ghostbusters, the movie, came out. And so, seeing this, the child of the Holy Ghost, yeah, I'm put in mind of this. Now, this is Ray Stantz, and he's essentially having a dream that he's being molested by a female ghost. So, but, it would be the other way around when it came with Mary. It'd be Mary, and then a male ghost would be, molesting her. So, I just had to bring that pop culture reference up. The whole idea of being impregnated by the Holy Ghost. Now, I'm just making, a bit of a joke on that. I understand the idea of, the two schools of thought when it comes to, the Holy Ghost. You've got the Trinity, which is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, which, for some, these are three separate entities. And then you have the belief in the one, where the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, yes, they're essentially personas of one single entity, which is the Father, which is God. But again, like I said, I was just doing that as a joke. Okay, so this was done basically before Joseph even touched Mary. Supposedly, that's what this is showing, which is weird, because when it came to marriage, when you married someone, you consummated the marriage, which means that on the wedding night, you would sleep with your spouse, you would have sexual relations, and a lot of times the woman, well, both technically should have been virgins, but it was more important for the woman to be a virgin. She was the first one that a man touched. Now, yes, that was the practice, but there is some, just like today, premarital sex and things like that. You would still have that. Now, the one thing that we have to understand when it comes to Mary, many scholars believe that she would have been anywhere from 12 to 14 years old. Now, that would send alarm bells in people's heads, especially in the West. The idea of being with someone that young, you would be, claiming, pedophilia, or at the very least, hebephilia. But in all actuality, that was common practice. There's a saying that goes around, if she's old enough to bleed, she's old enough to breed. And that's kind of how things were back then. It was not seen as taboo. Now, younger than that, yes, that would have been classified as, taboo. But she was of age. She was essentially no longer a girl. She was a young woman. But before Joseph even had anything, she was already showing with child. Now, because of this, we come down here to Matthew 1:19. It says that, then Joseph, her husband, they were already married, being a just man, and not willing to make her a public example, was minded to put her away privily. Long story short, he was thinking about divorcing her. Because she was showing that she was pregnant, so she was already unfaithful to him. He hadn't even touched her. He just married her, and she was already with child. But, of course, then we come down here, and it says, but while he thought on these things, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a dream, saying, Joseph, thou son of David, fear not to take unto thee Mary thy wife, for that which is conceived in her is of the Holy Ghost. Now, I'm quite sure that she probably tried to state her case, that, she'd never been touched by another man. This was God's child. This was something that was given to her by the Holy Ghost. Okay. And then he was like, yeah, right. You want me to believe that? And so it took him having a dream, and an angel of the Lord appeared and said, hey, no, you're supposed to do this. You're supposed to marry her. You're supposed to be the father of Jesus. And it's not by another man. It's by God or the Holy Ghost. Okay. There's actually been quite a few jokes that have been made about that, because, you think about it today. If a man married a woman, and, whether she claimed virginity or not, if she suddenly showed that she was pregnant, the man would probably lose his mind and be like, you're cheating on me? Okay, so that's kind of what we see here. And then, of course, there's the reassurance. Oh, no. Okay. All right. But one of the things that we want to look at is, it said that she was a virgin. Well, it doesn't say it here. It doesn't say it in Matthew. When we get into the book of Luke, this is where we get into the idea that she's supposed to be a virgin. Okay, but this is also where I'm going to show that No, she wasn't. Okay, so Luke 1:26. And in the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent from God unto a city of Galilee named Nazareth. Now I'm going to stop. For those that have watched my Incarnations of Thoth video, you might already see where this is going. Because I said at the end of the video, I said that it's a possibility that another one of his incarnations, another one of Thoth's incarnations, was the Archangel Gabriel. Luke 1:27. To a virgin espoused to a man whose name was Joseph, of the house of David, and the virgin's name was Mary. Okay, so this is one of the reasons why it could still be seen as that she was a virgin. This particular site that holds the Septuagint, scholars and linguists, things like that, they do the research. They know how the Greek language, all the various rules and things like that when it comes to using it. They show us when we click right here. Now, of course, this is the Greek word. It says, the noun Parthenos means virgin and has nothing to do with a lack of sexual experience or physical intercourse. Our English word virgin comes from the Latin word virgo, which either derives from or shares its root with Virgo, which describes a fresh branch of a plant or tree. A Virgo was a girl who still lived with her parents instead of with her husband. Since in antiquity sexual intercourse commonly resulted in pregnancy, and thus the decade and a half costly care for a child, no parent would allow their daughter to be impregnated by someone who didn't sign up for the duration. This was an economic consideration, not a sexual or moral one. So she could have still been considered a virgin, but would have had sexual relations with someone else. I mean, either an actual human or, as I'm going to show, an angel. Okay, now I do want to point one thing out. Parthenos. When we get into Parthenos, we actually have it's a field of study, basically. This is one of the names, the clinical names. Parthenogenesis. And this is reproduction from an ovum without fertilization, especially as a normal process in some invertebrates and lower plants. Now remember what it said. It said, which describes a fresh branch of a plant or tree. So this is something that's commonly seen in plants and invertebrates. We don't see this in higher life forms, especially humans. Now, there's been a hypothetical that has been brought up. How could it happen in a human? And the theory is that if a woman got struck by lightning, it didn't kill her, didn't really harm her, and it actually traveled down to where it essentially hit an egg, which is a cell, and caused mitosis to take place. The cell starts dividing. And of course, through the division of the cells, you start getting the zygote, and it eventually develops into fetus, so on and so forth. But if that were to be the case, because there is no Y chromosome, no Y genetic material introduced, it's just XX when it comes to the chromosomes, then the child would be female. Always. If this was the case. But again, there is no clinical cases that have shown true parthenogenesis. Okay. So here's where it's gonna get interesting. Okay. I have shown in my previous videos, especially A Tale of Two Atoms and the birds and the bees and the Anunnaki, I have shown that it requires physical intercourse, either through in vitro fertilization, or, as in the case of Enki and the two Cro-Magnon females, creating Homo sapien, where Enki actually went and had sexual relations with two of the Cro-Magnon females. And this created Adapa and Titi. So there has to be some form of physical. This is not something that's done with just a spirit. You have to create the physical body. And the physical body can only be created through some form of physical sexual activity. Again, it could still be in vitro fertilization. But here's where I'm going to show that it wasn't. Luke 1:28. And the angel came in unto her and said, Hail, Hail, thou that art highly favored, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women. And when she saw him, she was troubled at his saying, and cast in her mind what manner of salutation this should be. And the angel said unto her, Fear not, Mary, for thou hast found favor with God. Okay. So the first thing that I need to go through is and this is something that I was guilty of until I actually did the full research, until I actually really looked into things. For me, it used to be that the virgin birth and the Immaculate Conception were synonymous. They were one and the same thing, just called something different. Okay, so we come over here and we have the Immaculate Conception. The doctrine that God preserved the Virgin Mary from the taint of original sin from the moment she was conceived. This is talking about Mary and her conception. Okay, so now we have to go back to where, in my videos where I talked about ascension, and in my Great Spark commentary where I talked about the idea that we all vibrate, and we all vibrate at a specific frequency. It's a specific and unique frequency. So, in order to have a soul that vibrates at a specific frequency, they have to have a host. The flesh also has to vibrate at that frequency, or they can't meet up. Okay? I'm going to coin a phrase. Now, the root of this phrase or term, whatever you want to use, we know there's already a word for it. And that's where we get into the idea of eugenics. The study of how to arrange reproduction within a human population to increase the occurrence of heritable characteristics regarded as desirable. Now, Hitler was big into eugenics. You know, he was looking for his master race. And his master race was strong, intelligent, blonde-haired, blue-eyed. He was actually looking for the race of the gods, or to recreate the race of the gods. But he was big into eugenics. Pop culture reference. Star Trek. For those that know the Wrath of Khan. Khan was the product of eugenics. His parents were brought together specifically because they had traits that they wanted to breed into these super soldiers. Highly intelligent, incredibly strong. And it was because of the parents. So that was eugenics. And of course, because of the Khan and all the augments that were created at the same time that he was, because of what they did, because they tried to take over and everything like that, eugenics was kind of seen as a bad thing. And it still kind of is. And, you know, if you're selectively breeding, the offspring would actually be at a greater advantage to anyone else. And so it would cause a cascade effect where, okay, then now we need to selectively breed, you know, this many in order to make sure that the population stays at a certain level. Okay. Anyway, that's eugenics. The term that I'm coining is metaphysical eugenics. Now, I talked about this briefly in my Incarnations of Marduk video. I talked about how I proposed the idea that Marduk made an alliance with the Greys, with the Zetas, and that through, you know, some form of genetic engineering, and this is where I'm getting into the idea of the metaphysical eugenics, they were able to create a human gray hybrid body for Marduk's son, Nabu. And this is where we get Akhenaten. So the technology was already out there. They already knew that they could, through whatever means, manipulate parents to create a child that would vibrate at the certain frequency necessary to house a certain soul. Okay, so we'll come back here to the Immaculate Conception. So, okay, the original sin, that's supposed to be where Eve was tempted by the serpent in the garden. She partook of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and she gave it to Adam. Okay. I've already shown in the Tale of Two Adams that wasn't the case. There was no sin there. Not for Adamu and Tiamat, which that's the first Adam and Eve. It wasn't their sin. If there was a sin there at all, it was Enki's sin. because he's the one that did the further genetic manipulation to get Adamu and Tiamat to be able to procreate. They were hybrids. They were sterile. So there was no original sin. What this is actually meaning is that there was metaphysical eugenics that took place. That Mary's parents were brought together, however they were brought together, so that she could be conceived. And they knew that her frequency and the frequency that she would contribute to her offspring, along with Gabriel's. So between their two contributions, frequency contributions, the offspring would have the vibrational frequency necessary to hold the soul that was in Gabriel. Now, why doesn't he just walk around as Gabriel? Why did he have to be born as a human? Well, first of all, he's Gabriel. He's an angel. Angels were recognized on sight. They didn't look quite human. First of all, they're going to be a lot taller. And they're going to have some physical characteristics that set them apart from being human. So Jesus was actually, well, he's actually the ultimate scout. He's the ultimate infiltrator. Okay, this was at a time when the gods had already left. But they still had left Marduk, the Igigi, and Marduk's family. They were still here on Earth. And Marduk had corrupted all these systems. And so they needed an infiltrator. They needed somebody that could actually get in and see how the rest of the world, how the normal populace was dealing with the systems of Marduk. Of course, that took place, and yeah, he's seen that things needed to be done, but we're not going into that. All right, so pardon me. There's a funny expression, and it's actually a paradox. It's called the grandfather paradox. Actually, that's something different. That's if you go and kill your grandfather. But there's a phrase that it says, I'm my own grandpa. Now, pop culture reference, Futurama. Anybody watch Futurama? There is an episode where it explains the reason why Fry is the way that he is. Because he literally is his own grandfather because of a time travel incident. Okay, well, in this, what we're seeing is that Jesus is his own father. Now, it's not the flesh. Remember, it's not the flesh. It's the soul. The spirit, whatever you want to call it. Okay. So, I know this is messed up. But this is what I'm seeing. Okay. So, the first thing, one of the things that, a lot of people would be like, well, Gabriel just came to her and talked with her. Okay. So it says, and the angel came in unto her. Now again, this could be that he just came to her. But we also see this in the Old Testament, where it says, and the sons of God, seeing that the daughters of men were fair, and they went unto them, and they took them as wives, and they had children by them. Now again, entering. Now with this, any of the yellow, this is them running through the uses of different verbs and different adverbs and the different rules and tools of the actual language itself. But we come down here to the white box, and the white box is the actual definition, the actual explanation of what they're trying to do. So it says, together with the preposition meaning in, to, or toward, the verb, yeah, I'm not going to try to pronounce that, meaning to go in, to enter. How do you enter a woman? And I'm just going to leave it at that. So it was Gabriel that came to Mary and knocked her up because of this metaphysical eugenics. It wasn't a virgin birth, not because of the whole sexual intercourse or anything like that. It could still be considered she could have still been considered virgin if she still lived with her parents while she was married to Joseph. Thing is, we don't get that information. Did she still live with her parents while she was married to Joseph? Doesn't actually say. Now, this is going to start to sound like science fiction, but this is how this would work. Gabriel came, did the deed, and then explained that, yeah, you're going to have my child. And then he left. Now, he either went back to a spaceship or a space station or all the way back out to Nibiru. And he put his body into stasis. The Anunnaki body, the Gabriel body, was put into stasis. And this type of stasis actually kills the individual, thus putting them back into the cycle of reincarnation. Now, Thoth is an ascended master, so he can choose. Now, he'd already made arrangements for the body that he was going to inhabit to be created. So all he had to do was go through the uploading to the Akashic record and then awaiting for that body to mature enough that his soul can inhabit it. Now, this is relevant for today because there's a controversy when it comes to the idea of abortion. Some people believe that the soul is created at conception. Well, if this is correct, if what I'm talking about here, if what I'm presenting is correct, then that shows that the soul is not created, first of all. We're going through the process of reincarnation here. And that the soul doesn't inhabit the collection of cells that are created at conception. So at some point during the gestation of this collection of cells into the zygote, into the fetus, and then some point in the fetus is when, well, for lack of a better term, the portal opens and the soul can inhabit that host. Now, the Egyptians, they believed that the heart was the seat of the soul. If they were correct, then that means that the portal opened when the heart formed. Now, was it when it started forming, or was it when it was fully formed? this is something that we really need to look into. But it meant that he had time. He had time to go through the reincarnation cycle. He already had the host that was being created for him. All he had to do was go through the cycle, and then he could be reborn as the ultimate infiltrator. So this is showing that, no, it wasn't a virgin birth. Okay. I got through that. Now, I want to go into a few things. Looking at a few myths that I'm wanting to dispel. Jesus was not born in December. Now, there are a lot of people that, they know this. But why and how do we know this? Well, there are actually two places, two things that are going on, and they're happening in the book of Luke. That lets us know not the exact date, but at least the season. So we come here to Luke 2:1. And it came to pass in those days that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. And this taxing was made when Cyrenius was governor of Syria. And all went to be taxed, every one into his own city. And Joseph also went up from Galilee, out of the city of Nazareth, into Judea, unto the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David. Bethlehem was Joseph's family's hometown. Yeah, a lot of people don't realize, when it's, you hear the story, how they went from Nazareth to Bethlehem, and they don't know why they actually did that. Well, they did it because they had to go be counted. To be taxed with Mary, his espoused wife, being with great child. There were 2 new people added to his family. And so they had to be counted so that they could be taxed. Now, here's a question. First of all, let you know that tax season has never changed. Never. Taxes are done at a specific time of the year, and it has never changed. Now, here in the United States, the last date, without some sort of a circumstance, the last date that you can file your taxes is April 15th. April. So what we're looking at when it comes to a tax season is February to April. Not December. Now, because this was Joseph's family, he had relatives, aunts and uncles and nephews and cousins and brothers and whatever. He had family here. Okay, so when it comes to the idea of the inn, there was no room in the inn. He wouldn't have stayed in an inn. He would have stayed at one of his family members. Now, to be perfectly honest with you, there were no inns. Because back then, people were incredibly trusting. This is something you see very rarely nowadays. And there is a religious order that actually relies on, but I'll get in that here in a minute, okay? But back then, when a stranger would come into town, one of the citizens would offer them a meal and a bed. There was no inn, there was no need for an inn. Because the people of the town or the city, they had hospitality. And they didn't fear that this stranger that they bring into their house was going to rob them, kill them, rape them, anything like that. Nowadays, yeah, that's a major concern. But the Church of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, they're missionaries. When they're out walking the street and they're, witnessing and talking about Jesus and everything, talking about their religion, at the end of the night, they don't have a base of operations. They look for a good Samaritan. They look for someone who is going to take them in, feed them, give them a bed. Now, they don't do this for free. It's one of the things that I've noticed about the Mormons, that they are helpful. They do chores and things like that. They don't expect things for free. Now, I'm quite sure if they can't find someone that will take them in, that if there is a Mormon church in that town or that city, then yes, they could probably take up there, or even any other religion church. But they usually try to find someone that they can, go into their house, share a meal with them, and sleep. And then, of course, they get up the next day and they start all over again. But that was common practice back in those days, back in the Bible days. If a stranger came in, you offered them hospitality. Okay, so there would have been no inn. Okay. This is where it comes in. It says there was no room for them in the inn, and the relaxery. That's what they. But there are those that say that this actually has a different interpretation, a different translation. Instead of there was no room for them in the inn, it is there was no accommodation in the room. And I'll get into that here in a minute, because I want to get one more thing. And this is to show that, he wasn't born in December. Okay. This is kind of a famous line. Those that have watched seen the play, The Greatest Story Ever Told, and things like that. Luke 2:8. And there were in that same country shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flocks by night. Okay. December in the northern hemisphere, which that's where this would have been, in the northern hemisphere. December in the northern hemisphere is cold. We're talking snow and frost and ice. It's cold. If the shepherds were out watching their flocks at night, both the shepherds and their flocks would have frozen to death. Now, what was common practice was during the cold seasons, at night, the flocks would come into the house of the shepherd and his family. The flock was everything to them. Okay, that was their livelihood. That's how they made their living. They had to protect the flock. So they would bring them into the house. Now, if you were a fairly well-off shepherd, you had a 2-story house. You had the first story, which was actually under the ground. They would actually dig down into the ground, and this is where the animals would stay. Unfortunately, this was usually also where the kitchen was. But at that point in time, they really didn't, know about disease and parasites. And the other thing is because they were inside, the animals would defecate. You would have feces on the floor. Again, the flock was important. Now, the ground floor of this house would be the living quarters, and it would be kept clean. It wouldn't have, feces and everything like that. But again, you would have feces around the kitchen. Yeah. Now, that was if you were a fairly well-off shepherd. If not, then you just had single level, and you had your flock in the house with you. Now, because your flock is inside, you had to have a way to feed them. And this is where they would bring in the food trough, also known as the manger. A manger is a food trough. And this was common practice. They would have the manger inside so that they could feed their flock during the cold season. Now, they wouldn't have been out in December. When they would have been out, would have been at a time known as the lambing season, or the lambing time. It takes 5 months for a lamb to fully grow and develop inside a ewe. So almost all of the lambs are born in February and early March. The reason why the shepherds would have been watching their flock at night was because those ewes, they give birth all day long, all night long. When it's time, that's when they do it. So, yes, the shepherd is supposed to be vigilant for his flock, but during this time, they had to be especially vigilant. Because, one, the ewe is going to be prone. She's not going to be able to get up and run away while she's giving birth. So if a predator comes up, she's screwed. 2, the birthing process, the smells that are given off, carry far and wide. And the predators, they smell this, and they come running because, hey, this is a good meal. So that's the reason why the shepherds would have been watching their flocks at night, is during the lambing season. And the lambing season is February and early March, not December. Now, remember how I said that the manger was brought into the house, that food trough, okay? There is no mention of a stable, period, in either one of these, Matthew or Luke. In fact, when the 3 wise men showed up, it said, and they were come into the house. There was a house, no stable. The reason why it's assumed that it was a stable is because of the manger. But that manger is a food trough, and it would have already been in the house. And it was common practice to use a manger as a makeshift crib. Remember, there was no accommodation in the room. There was no crib in the room. So they used the manger. Now, one other thing. The stable. Remember, I said there's no mention of stable. And there wouldn't have been a stable. Commoners, people that, were just citizens of the city, they didn't have stables. They didn't have barns. They might have had a small corral, if they had enough room between the buildings of each other's houses, but usually they didn't have that much room. So there was no stable, there was no barn. unless, of course, you had a Roman garrison stationed. Now, Bethlehem was a large city, so they would have had a Roman garrison, and they would have had stables. But these are for the horses of the Roman soldiers. They would not have been utilized to allow somebody to give birth because there was no room in the inn. So, not December. Now, the one thing that I've seen, and I'm almost wondering if he didn't engineer it this way. Jesus was actually born and he died in the same season. Spring. Because when we look at the crucifixion prior to his arrest, you had the Last Supper. The Last Supper was a Passover Seder. This was a feast that they did for Passover. And then he was arrested, and he was crucified, and 3 days later, okay, you know the story. All right. So, why December? Why has it been made to be that December was Jesus' birth? Well, that's where we get into a Roman pagan festival known as Saturnalia. Now, Saturnalia is an anywhere from week and a half to 2 week long festival that culminates on December 25th. Now, the main theme behind Saturnalia is this is the celebration of the birthday of the sun, S-O-N, of the sun, S-U-N. Now, because some of the things that goes on during Saturnalia, and I'm not going to go into all of them, this will be in the description. You can read it. There's other places that you can look up for Saturnalia. But because it was the most loved by the people, it was the most loved celebration, that when the church, the Christian church, tried to get these pagan rituals, thrown out, the people didn't want to do it because they loved this festival. So the church was like, okay, fine. You can't do a lot of the things that you could do because, let's face it, this festival was full of debauchery. Okay, this is, yeah. This is kind of the reason why pagans are given some really bad reputation, is because of this festival. Okay. They're like, okay, so you're not going to be able to do some of that, and it's not going to last for a week and a half, 2 weeks. But the end date, that December 25th, that is the birthday of the Son, S-O-N, of God. They seen the Son, S-U-N, as God. So the Son of God's birthday was at the very end of what would have been this Roman pagan festival. But, I'm just showing possibilities here, okay? I'm showing things that I see when I read these various texts. And the epiphanies that are given to me. The whole idea of reincarnation and of ascension, and of how Mary was engineered even before her birth to be the parent that would be part of creation of the physical body necessary to hold Thoth's soul. And then, of course, the other parent was Thoth's current physical body. Yeah. Whether you believe it or not is, it's irrelevant. I'm just showing what I'm seeing. And honestly, to me, it makes sense. Especially going with the Anunnaki theory, especially going with the idea of ascension and reincarnation. It makes sense. But as I've always stated, I'm not trying to sway somebody from their beliefs, not trying to convert. I'm just giving possibilities. I'm the Anunnaki theorist. Enjoy.